Good evening. Tonight is the North Andover Select Board meeting on September 14th, 7 o'clock, and need to read the statement. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, GLC 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the North Andover Board of Selectmen will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by the members of the public and or parties with a right and or requirement to attend this meeting may be found at the town's website at www.northandoverma.gov. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so on their televisions by tuning to Comcast Channel 8 or Verizon Channel 26, or online at www.northandovercam.org. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the Town of North Andover website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of the proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. So with that, I'll call to order our meeting with a roll call for attendance. So, Laura?
Laura here.
Phil DiColligero here.
Rosemary Smedili here.
I am here, Richard Valhouse. For some reason, I'm having a problem with the mute. It's fighting with me, so sorry for that. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, we got you. That's good. Thanks, Dick. And Chris Noble is here. All good. Appreciate it. Thanks for everybody's patience. All right, so we'll start off with public comment. And again, as now is our procedure, there's a process where people can request that we reach out to them for public comment. So, Melissa, do we have any folks who contacted us for public comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We do. We have 2 regular public comments and then 2 that are for the public hearing later in the meeting. So I'm just going to do the 2 regular comments. The first one is from Jennifer Goldman on Durant Place. She just wants us to share her questions and comments without calling her. She states, I request active collaboration among selectmen, school committee, superintendent, finance committee, and the town manager to create a comprehensive 5-year capital and operating projection and plan for infrastructure, learning delivery, staff to reduce class sizes, social emotional support, professional development, and other needed improvements. I request the first draft of this comprehensive plan be presented to residents before December 31st, 2020 to allow time for meaningful collaborative discussions regarding funding before we have to vote on them in the town meeting in May. The second comment is from Tom Dugan. He's on Beacon Hill Boulevard. His comment states, good evening. Thank you to the board and the town manager. My comments are on the fiscal year 21 goals. Specifically, please establish a consensus goal with the school committee for a schedule and finance plan to fully implement and resource the district strategic plan. Any number of objective measures suggest that the current level of funding, staffing, and physical resources is insufficient to provide our current and future generations with the best possible educational outcomes. The board often celebrates our AAA bond rating. Perhaps it is time for us as a community to establish a goal of being one of the top 10 school districts in the Commonwealth. As part of the implementation of this goal, I ask that you create more effective public participation venues similar to the master planning process or other communities' participatory budgeting at the municipal level for residents to comment about the budget, the trade-offs, what if analysis, and steps necessary to implement that plan. He also is not requesting a phone call and just asked for his comments to be read aloud. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That is the 2 public comments that we have received.
Well, I appreciate that from both Tom and Jen, and we will take this under consideration, and we are looking at the possibility of doing a joint meeting in the near future with our school committee and our finance committee. With that, I'll need, we move to licensing, so I'll need a motion to move into licensing, please.
Mr. Chairman, Phil DiColigiero, I motion that we move into licensing.
Thank you.
Laura Bates, second.
Appreciate that. If we could have a roll call, please.
Laura Bates, aye.
Phil DiColigiero, aye.
Rosemary Smedili, aye.
I think that came out as Dick Valancourt. We'll take that as Dick Valancourt.
Oh,
And
Mr.
Chris
Valancourt, aye.
Mobley, aye.
Sorry, I was on mute.
Okay. We got you. We're in licensing.
Okay. We are now in licensing. It's we have kind of an unusual set of tasks before us. So before we get going, I will read the statement. Speakers, Madam Chair, do I have to read the statement for every public hearing so that we go into? Because I think there's 3 of them, and then the opening. Is that still required for each one?
That is required.
Oh,
I know they're long.
a tape recorder so I can just hit play.
You're gonna need water for sure.
Okay, all righty. So, okay, so our first item, excuse me, just a lot of papers with this as I'm moving from agenda to agenda. So the first item is a public hearing, application for amendments to liquor license, MML Enterprises LLC, DBA, Mike's Market, 220 Middlesex Street. And okay, so which will, okay, well, so we need a vote. Excuse me, just give me a second. So the public hearing. Okay, so I guess I do read that statement again. So pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law GLC 30A-18 and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the North Andover Board of, this meeting of the North Andover Licensing Commission, I'm reading the wrong one. Hold on, give me 1 second. Of the Licensing Commission are being conducted via remote participation. No one in attendance of the members of the public will be permitted, but the public can listen to the hearing while in progress by tuning into Comcast Channel 8 or Verizon Channel 26 or online at www.northandovercam.org. Members of the public attending these hearings virtually will be allowed to make comments if they wish to do so during the portion of the hearing designated for public comments by completing the online form at www.northandoverma.gov/SB public comments. Okay, so I will entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
Move that the Board of Selectmen act as licensing commissioners, open public hearing to receive comments regarding the application for amendments to the liquor license for JMML Enterprises LLC DBA Mike's Market, 2020 Middlesex Street.
Second.
We have a motion, and was that seconded by Selectman DiColigiero?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye, and we will do a roll call vote.
Laura Bates, aye.
Phil DiColigiero, aye.
Chris Nobley, aye.
Richard Valencourt, aye.
And Rosemary Smedili, aye. So we are now in the public hearing. So again, I'm going to ask Madam Town Manager, is Brian Vaughn with us this evening, Attorney Vaughn?
Yes, this is Brian Vaughn from
Hi, Brian.
Smolak and Vaughn. Hi,
So-
how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Because of this somewhat complicated and involved, would it be appropriate to have Attorney Vaughn speak to what the applicants will be requesting, starting with the first one? Is that appropriate at this time?
Vice Selectwoman, I think that would certainly be appropriate to have him give you a summary of what you are doing tonight. We do have a few public comments, so we can certainly do that after he gives his summary. And Laurie says that she believes since they're all posted for the same time, you only have to read that once. So you're relieved of that, thankfully.
Oh, good.
We'll buy Laurie a cupcake tomorrow. But yeah, so all you need to do is have him give a brief explanation, and then we can get into the public hearing portion.
Yeah, I think that it seems to make sense because no one will really understand what's going on, and it would be helpful as Attorney Vaughn, lays the groundwork of what's come forward. So having said that, Attorney Vaughn.
Okay, so this is the existing Mike's Market, and they're the holders of an existing license. In fact, nothing really is changing on the ground with respect to this operation. It's kind of I guess a technical process we need to go through. The ownership of the entity was being transferred as an interfamily transfer from between spouses. So the husbands were transferring the ownership interest in the entity to the wives. And then there was a change in manager being processed where Jim Zanakis was formerly the manager, and Meg Zanakis, one of the new owners, was going to become the manager for purposes of the liquor license. So we've requested approval effectively for the indirect transfer of the ownership interest whenever there's a change in ownership interest of a license indirectly. As you're all aware, but the public may not be aware, you need to seek approval for the transfer through ABCC. In connection with those transfers as well, it's change in officers of the entity. But otherwise, it's an existing operation, Mike's Market, which is going to continue, in accordance with its current operating.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that summary. So do we have any public comment that needs to be read for this, or anybody submit anything?
Madam Chair, can I ask Attorney Vaughn a question?
Sure.
Before we do that?
Yeah.
So, Attorney Vaughn,
Sure.
the letter that I'm reading from you also says it's a change of classification from malt and wine and malt to all alcohol beverages. That's on the table for tonight as well, right? I don't remember.
Yeah, obviously I've got multiple applications in front of us, and I was confusing.
So the one we're talking about right now, the Middlesex Street operation, is the one I believe we're talking about.
Correct. So on this application, you are correct. There was also a change. So it currently is a beer and wine license only. There has already there had been a change in status approved with special legislation to go to an all alcohol license. So that was the other piece of this particular application that was also being requested.
Got it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And okay, you're all set, Selectman Valencourt. Any other questions or from the board? Hearing none.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So I just want to be clear that the opportunity to ask questions about the amendment to the liquor license would come after this, the closing of the public hearing, correct?
So
I
when
just
you,
want to make sure.
So Madam Chair,
I wanna
why don't I go ahead and read out what we had for comments just on this one application? And
Yeah,
then
I'm just-
go ahead and close the public hearing and then let the board ask questions of Attorney Vaughn.
thank you. That's what I was,
You're good. So this one, I'm just gonna do the ones for JMML because we also have some for SJ Enterprises later. But there's one, and it is from Jim Weffers on Harold Street. And it says, sorry, it's a little bit hard to read. There we go. Thank you, Laurie. Seeking the change of classification from wine and malt to all alcoholic beverages. Currently, we have 8 all alcoholic licensed liquor stores in town, all located in a shopping mall, mini mall, or strip mall. Mickaloon's Package Store, Wine Connection, 114 Liquors, Cork Shop, Main Street Liquors, Bitch Boy Market, The Vineyard, and Den Wine and Spirits. Would that be correct? If so, would it be correct that Mike Market would be the only all alcoholic beverages establishment in town located in a dense residential neighborhood? It is a standalone building located on the busy intersection of Waverly and Middlesex near the Thompson School. I understand the interested party must make a living as a businessman, but my concern is for the neighborhood. The location already has a beer and wine license and the lottery isn't bad enough. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to share my thoughts during these difficult times of COVID. Jim Weffers. That is the only public comment we have for this application, Madam Chair.
okay, thank you very much. Okay, so having read that.
I did have the opportunity to speak with.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I had the opportunity to speak with Mr. Weaver specifically about this, and I thought because I grew up in that neighborhood and we talked about how that particular location, how the people who own it and operate it can certainly dictate how it's perceived by the public. When I grew up, even though it was a variety store, it was a candy store because that's where the neighborhood kids went to get candy. Although it had many different things besides candy there. And I think that the concern that Mr. Weaver's, the root of his concern is that, the last thing that neighborhood wants to see is that this particular corner market, which they've done a fantastic job of renovating this family and making a market on the corner. I don't think the neighbors want to see it become a liquor store. Even if it gets a license, certainly they don't want to see it billed as a liquor store. And so granted, if we were to approve this, once it's approved, it's approved. I just didn't know if Mr. Vaughn had some more insight into the planned application of the all alcohol license, if it were approved at the site.
Yeah. Is that being directed to me at this point?
Is that okay? I mean, I just don't want to. I want to respect the role of the public hearing process. So if Madam Chair, if this isn't the appropriate time to have Mr. Vaughn answer the question or add that insight,
Well,
I'll defer to you.
Okay. In fairness to everybody, having these 3 that are all interrelated in getting public accommodation, it is a little bit different than our usual one. But I think the best thing would be that we, as members of the Board of Selectmen, ask our questions of Attorney Vaughn after the public hearing portion is closed. So I think that if there was any other comment, which I believe, as Madam Town Manager said, there are not, that we should probably close the public hearing, and then we as members of the board would ask Attorney Vaughn our questions and go from there. Does anybody object to that? It is, again, this is a little different. I'm trying to go by the rules the best we can and make it as efficient as possible, but is everybody on the board, are they comfortable with that?
Yes. I'm fine.
Okay.
All
right.
If that's the case, Madam Chair, I'd move that the Board of Selectmen, acting as licensing commissioners, close the public hearing to receive comments regarding the application for amendments to the liquor license for JMML Enterprises LLC, DBA Mike's Market, 220 Middlesex Street.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Chris
Laura
Noble
Bates.
here.
Okay, I believe I heard Laura speak first, so seconded by Laura. All those in favor say aye.
Laura Bates, aye.
Phil DiCollegiero, aye.
Chris Noble, aye.
Richard Valencourt, yes.
And Rosemary Smedili, aye. We are now closed from the public hearing of this portion of this application. So we'll leave it open for members of the Board of Selectmen to ask Attorney Ron questions and discuss this matter. So, Phil, did you want to go first, or?
Yes, so Brian, my question was, how does the site plan on applying this license to the existing business?
Can you say that again?
So how, if approved, how will the owners of this site apply the full liquor license to the existing market? What would the layout, what type of product did they plan on having?
Right,
some more
okay.
insight into that.
So I guess the character of the business is not intended to really change at all. It's just a matter of right now, it already has beer and wine. They would be able to expand to include all alcohol, of course. However, it's more than just a package store, as you're all aware, and that's the ongoing intent of the business plan, is to not change what it is. It's kind of almost like a small J&M market that we're all familiar with. They do intend to continue to sell the coffee and the convenience items. The character of the business is not at all intended to change to become a traditional liquor store. It's more of the ability to also sell higher end alcohol that is kind of, I guess, consistent with what we see maybe at the Wine Connection now, as well as with J&M or Butcher Boy. And then I guess secondly, I would also just point out to the board that these very issues were already addressed by the town at town meeting. Keep in mind that this already went through a town meeting process where these issues were addressed on the floor of town meeting, and the town as a whole voted to act to approve this change. So as the special act process, this is kind of almost a second bite of the apple that's being taken because these issues were already addressed.
So when they've had this for a while, though, correct? It was I think the previous town meeting. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, it takes a while to get it through the state after it's voted.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions or comments or?
I just had
Yeah, a quick question. So, Attorney Vaughn, would the owners of Mike's Market be willing to provide us with a layout, and would they also be willing to, if we put restrictions on the percent footage that could be used for liquor, would they be amenable to that, since it is going to be only a specialty liquor store? I think that might go a long way to, given the neighbors comfort that it's not going to become an all-out liquor store. If we were able to say, X percentage would be dedicated to the sale of liquor, and the rest would stay as a market and a convenience store.
Unfortunately, I don't have them on the line right now. I could try to get in touch with them and see what they might be amenable to as a percentage, if you were suggesting that, or
or perhaps only have the hard alcohol present behind the counter.
Yeah, or even just even like a layout, a proposed layout of what the store is going to look like once it's starting to provide all alcohol.
Yeah, and as far as the layout, I don't know that there's necessarily a true change in layout. It's not an alteration of the actual physical premises that we're seeking with.
No, I maybe misunderstood. I really am just looking for an internal layout of the store, how positioned, what what amount or what percentage of the store would be dedicated to the sale of liquor. Just not a change of the actual physical layout of the store, but internally when they start selling liquor, where is it going to be provided from?
Mm-hmm. Would just thinking about this, would you be comfortable maybe with a percentage of floor space that is allocated to alcohol versus other products, or a percentage which was other than, I guess, beer and wine with respect to alcohol?
I mean, yeah, that would be a start. So we know, and so we just get some idea of how much of the store is going to be dedicated to the sale of alcohol. I mean, I guess in the application, and I know it's probably not a requirement, but it would have been nice to see a store layout with the proposed layout on where alcohol would be carried and sold from.
And I would echo Selectman Valancourt's point. When we licensed a service station on 114, they provided a layout as they were now offering, and again gave us that sense, to Phil's point earlier, that it wasn't just going to be a beer stop type location. And I think that reassurance was helpful to have, and I think they've stuck with it. So I think that's really kind of the same. There's a common sense feel to it. Am I expressing that right?
Yeah, I agree.
I think it's important to be cognizant that this particular site is a stop for students who are walking home from the Kittredge, from the Thompson schools. The crossing guard, in fact, is so heavily trafficked that we do place a crossing guard there as a community. The owners are, in fact, fantastic that in cold mornings, the crossing guard literally uses that as a place to warm before she goes out and lets kids and families cross back and forth. And so I'm cognizant of how there's perception and there's reality, and that's why I think that the understanding of the layout would be helpful, because I mean, I personally it was not unanimous when the last Board of Selectmen voted for whether or not the site had beer and wine. I voted for beer and wine because I felt that the case was made that it would be higher end, and it's proven to be that way. It's a market, it's a convenience store. I think it's a fine line from being a convenience store to being a full-fledged liquor store. I think about I walked down there with my dog, and my daughter's run inside and grabbed candy and grabbed the meat. I think that's a dramatically different experience than if you were to walk down to Main Street Liquors, for instance, which is predominantly alcohol. So that's why they have some minor non-alcoholic things, but it's relatively all alcohol. So I doubt that that it would be that extreme, this particular site, but if they were to get this license, but I think it would be helpful to know what the planned layout would be. Not just because it's residential, but again, because of the type of traffic where it really is a pedestrian heavy place for kids.
Okay. So as I've been listening to you, I've been trying to communicate with my client electronically, and I have been able to confirm that again, as I said, they really don't intend any change. It's more of a convenience store, intend to be more of a convenience store. We would suggest, if you were okay with it, perhaps no more than 30% of the floor space would be dedicated to alcohol sales. which is currently, which is kind of consistent with the way it's laid out currently.
Does that include beer and wine, or is that just for all, for other than malt liquors and beer and wine? Or just beer
So
and wine?
that includes,
30%,
that's
and then you've got
the
wine
total
coolers?
including beer and wine.
30%.
Last time, when they presented us to say the beer and wine, we also talked about, because of the, you know, the existing floor space is to have it in a place where small children couldn't easily reach it, to have it up higher. I think we talked about behind the, you know, behind the register and things like that, just again, so that it, you know, they can sell products for a corner market as well as for spirits too, but in a safe fashion. So I think that that's a consideration as well. But I think the percentage is a really good idea. However, I feel obligated to ask this question. And at some point, if they decide that they no longer want to be a corner market and just go into a full-blown liquor store, is there anything that would prevent them from doing that?
Well, I would, if we, you know, if we offered and if you approved it with the condition of it being, you know, only 30% of the floor space, while there isn't necessarily anything that would prevent them, they wouldn't be able to do it as a practical matter unless they were willing to have a liquor store with 70% of its space that was empty.
Okay.
They built an oversized counter in that store, and really they've done a fantastic job with the renovations and the layout. I mean, the thing that keeps jumping to my mind is the smaller bottles and the nips that would potentially be on sale. I mean, why couldn't the harder alcohol just be kept behind the counter, just as a way to maintain, again, the family-friendly atmosphere of the market? And they continue to have the frontage by the way that they already have. They don't currently keep the beer and wine behind that counter, so surely, I mean, that will allow them to actually still utilize that space that's already part of the floor plan. But at least by keeping it behind the counter, I mean, in the event that you have multiple parties in there all at once, I mean, they never have more than 2 staff people at most on duty at a given time.
Yeah, my only hesitation, and again, I'm trying to confirm electronically with my client, is not knowing exactly the retail plan, and I think you raise a good point as to the nips and smaller things, but you know, sometimes with a higher end, you know, alcohol, maybe, you know, you want it on your retail floor, you know, quote unquote, I guess, top shelf or something like that. It's kind of a retail marketing process. So maybe could we have, you know, any of the nips or smaller bottles such as that behind the counter, but not limit it entirely?
So I've seen several communities where they have language in their policies that nips may be offered for sale only upon the request of a customer from a location within the premises to which customers do not have direct access.
I mean, so when I think about like high end, and I appreciate that insight, Madam Town Manager, I just don't see why, again, where you have the space, it's the smallest store to begin with, why that wouldn't just be an option. I mean, if someone's coming by that corner store, like I know I use it to pick up, well, I deliberately go there for me, but otherwise it's a convenience store. That's the reality. And so if it's high-end alcohol, that's great, but I guess I share the concerns, and I definitely hear those that have been expressed by neighbors regarding the convenience of hard alcohol and how that can change how that store is viewed by consumers, both inside and outside of the neighborhood.
No, I agree. I think what I'm saying is, I think if they are going to offer nips, I think a condition of that could be that nips not be accessible by the customer. So no direct access for alcohol less than, a certain ounces, which I think would solve. I think that condition could solve what you're looking at.
Right. I think though the other issue, Phil, is with the larger bottles is just that with the smaller store, you almost have to keep the inventory on the floor, and there's a lot that's going on behind the counter already with scratch tickets, other things, where if all of that inventory then is required to be kept behind the counter as opposed to just the smaller bottles, it potentially can just create difficulties on the logistical operational side. So I think that they wouldn't have any problem with smaller bottles being behind the counter. I think it's just when you get into any kind of larger bottles, just for more of inventory storage and management purposes, I believe.
So can I make a suggestion? Would it be too outlandish to ask to put together a site plan or store mapping, even if it's, roughed out and with a percentage of the amount of alcohol? Now, let me be clear. I have a great deal of respect for the family and I know they're great business people, and they've done wonderful things by this town. And I have nothing against any of the family, and I'm not saying this about them, but there may be a time that they decide to sell the store. And if the liquor license goes with the store, then we may not have the same credibility in the ownership or whatever, what have you. So I would like to see some kind of a layout and something in some kind of a writing in the agreement that, we limit the size and the locations of where the alcohol could be. Throwing that out as a suggestion for discussion.
Dick, I think that's a good point. I mean, at 30%, you're almost at 1/3 of the space for a convenience store that, as Phil was making the case, is a convenience store and has some other products that people go there out of their way for. That seems to me to be a little high. And if you're trying to put nips in there, you're trying to put high end and all that, I think that just feeds into it. I understand you're trying to maximize every square footage there, but kind of given the community location, I think you make a good case for it. And again, there's a little precedent for it, so I definitely would be inclined to wait to have that in hand to be 100% comfortable in moving forward.
It's interesting because it's sort of a blend between a neighborhood convenience store, but
Right.
I think they're also trying to keep that friendly image. But there are items that they bring in that I think, especially around the holidays and such, that almost make it a gourmet convenience store to some degree. They bring in baked goods and other really wonderful items that, so it seems like it's sort of a melding of, in a small space, which is all good, is a nice neighborhood store that brings, has your basics, has some fun things that people like with the scratch tickets and stuff, but also, brings in items that I think people add a bit of class to their convenience store, a hominess to it. So it is kind of interesting. There's a lot going on in that space, but I think I think the family does, as others have mentioned earlier, they have the capacity to be able to pull all of that together to make it just a very nice store where you also could pick up for a family event or something or whatever, or an evening at home. But I am inclined just to kind of, I'm interested to see the layout. More concerned about, because there are, you know, young children that do go in there, and the nips would definitely be enticing to a small child, these little bottles, not really knowing what they're all about, or you hope they don't know too much what they're all about. You know, Attorney Vaughn, if the family would be, you know, maybe interested in supplying us how they would lay this out and continue to make it, you know, the neighborhood, the friendly neighborhood store that it certainly is. It probably would go a long way with, I think, all of us and the neighbors as well.
I'd also like to chime in with little kids, and you know, we have friends in the neighborhood, and it's a wonderful, wonderful store right now. And I think it would be important to us and to the neighbors to see that percentage of alcohol sales, and maybe even broken down further to how much hard alcohol they plan on selling, and not so much for the current owners, but in the future, to have that tied to the license would be important for the neighborhood.
Well, so I guess if what I'm hearing is you're looking perhaps to continue until we can bring you back a plan showing percentages of and where things would intend to be located. I mean, the reality is it's intending to be the same exact layout as it is now, without an increase in the floor space being dedicated to the sale of alcohol. Is there anything you'd be willing to accept as to a restriction which didn't require continuation, or am I hearing you correctly that you pretty much just want to see a floor plan?
I think it's the latter, Brian.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I have not been in the store for quite a bit of time, so I don't know what their current layout even would look like.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's well, I mean, for other members, that's just my opinion.
I agree with you.
I would concur.
Yep.
And I know, and I understand what you said, Brian, about the point that, you know, this has already kind of been, you know, discussed at town meeting, but I do think that people perceive beer and wine differently than a full-blown liquor license. And I think that had a full liquor license been part of the conversation initially, you might have had people speak up differently at the town meeting. I definitely would have had a little bit more pause. I mean, again, I trust the owners, and they've proven that they have the experience to run these types of businesses. But given where this particular location is, and the way that that neighborhood specifically treats that business in a good way, again, I think the discussion would have been different. I'm not saying the result would have been different per se, but I think that the discussion would have been different. So,
okay.
I would certainly be open to, I mean, I think the board has laid out what they'd like to see, but I would be open to hearing what they might have in mind that we haven't thought of, that we would be equally or even maybe more happy with as well. I guess I'd like to say for myself, I'm open-minded as to how the family will promote this business and keep the neighborhood feel, keep the children safe, and yet have a nice thriving business that frankly, a lot of people in the neighborhood really enjoy. They love the convenience of it, and they love the products. So I guess I'm a little bit more open-minded. Well, maybe they'll come up with even better idea that we would like. I would hate to just say, just do this, but that's me.
Okay. Well, I mean, I guess it's really the same point across the board. I'd suggest that just some sort of agreeable condition, which is going to give you guys an assurance as to maintaining the current character of the operation, so that it isn't a wholesale change into a quote unquote liquor store. And it whether that's a floor plan with where things will be located, and whether it's some type of a percentage, we can come up with a more specific plan to put in front of you for the next meeting.
To be clear, I'd like to see both. I mean, not one or the other. I'd like to see the floor plan and then understand the percentage of that floor that would be used for alcohol sales.
Okay.
Okay, so just to be clear, this item will be on our next agenda, but with no public hearing. Okay, we already closed the public hearing. We won't continue the public hearing. We'll have this item under licensing on our next agenda, as long as we've received all of the relevant documents. Okay.
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 And Madam Town Manager, maybe we should make that as part of a condition for all these types of applications when we have a change of this type, to include a layout of the retail space.
Sure, we certainly can do that. Laurie did go and look while we were having this conversation. We have the original layout from back when they got their original license, nothing updated, which would make sense if they haven't contemplated any changes, but we certainly can ask for updated layouts when we have any significant changes to the licenses moving forward.
Yeah. Okay, makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Madam Town Manager, and this is just informational for myself, do we limit the amount of all liquor licenses we issue throughout the town?
We do. So we are at our cap on our licenses right now, and the way that they actually are getting this license is through special legislation. So they applied to town meeting asking for the cap to be hired specifically for their location. And it's by population.
And so can we have that ability to amend that when it's before? That wouldn't have to go back before town meeting. I'm sorry.
So the license is specific. It's an all alcohol license for a town meeting. That was put to them by town meeting. Your job as a licensing authority is to actually issue that license. There are certain metrics that would make the license that you could not grant it. You are allowed to put reasonable conditions on the license prior to your application that the ABCC can either allow or not allow. So yes, you are allowed to put reasonable conditions on the license.
Okay, so having said that, so we've closed the public hearing, so this will just come back at, I guess whatever the time that you feel as though that attorneys want, that your client needs for a discussion and a vote.
So Madam Chair, no action is required on item B, and you can move to the
Thank you. That's what I was
items.
thinking. I was trying to think what would be our next step. So no action is required. It will just be brought back at a future date. So having said that, we shall move to the next item on the agenda. I'm hearing a lot of echo. Is somebody making a comment or no? Okay, so the next item on the agenda is a vote on the application of amendments to the liquor license J All Enterprises. Again, at my market. So having said that, Attorney Vaughn, would you like to speak to this particular application?
Well, I vote is probably not really for me to speak to, except to the extent that it would, well, you could either, I guess, vote to approve subject to the condition that we provide you with the plan that's satisfactory, or it would be continued to the next meeting to vote once you have the materials in front of you.
Right, so these two items are contingent on each other, Madam Chair. So what I would do is I would I would open the public hearing, entertain a motion to open the public hearing, then entertain a motion to continue the public hearing.
Okay.
I think though, if I was hearing you correctly, you were talking about item B, which was the vote on 220 Middlesex, which item A was the actual application.
She's on item C, public hearing, application for amendments to liquor license for Virginia Inc., DBA, J&M, 701 Salem Street.
So this one actually then, if we're to item C, this one is not at all contingent. This is actually totally separate.
So item E is the contingent one. Okay, so we can move forward with C. I apologize.
No problem. No problem. Okay, so item C is actually the Virginia Inc. is J&M 701 Salem Street. And actually, did you need to read the public notice on this one, or no?
She does not.
Yeah, we found out that I don't have to do that, but thank you.
Excuse me, yeah,
All right.
but you do have to open the public hearing.
Okay.
Okay, I just do not have to read the paragraph. Okay, so
Right.
I would entertain a motion to open the public hearing for item
And
C.
we open the public hearing for amendments to the liquor license for Virginia Inc., DBA, J&M 701 Salem Street.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor say aye. Roll call vote, please.
Laura Bates, aye.
Phil DiColigiero, aye.
Chris Nobley, aye.
Richard Valencourt, yes.
And Rosemary Smedili, aye. Again, we're on C. Okay, so now that we're in the public hearing, Madam Chair, do we have any comments from the public on this? Not Madam Chair. Madam Town Manager, please.
Wait a minute, I'm just looking, I do not, so for J&M, I apologize. The comments are very tiny, so it's sometimes hard to see them. Lori, do we have any for J&M?
No, I
We
believe,
only have SJ, correct?
I believe the only one is the next one, the Mass Ave one.
So yes, sorry, it's small. Yes, we don't have any for this one. Thank you.
Okay, so we're all set for this, so there's no comments. And is there anything that Attorney Vaughn would like to speak to on this, or are we all set with that?
Yeah, this one again is also a transfer of the membership interest, beneficial interest, dealing with the interfamily transfer when the business was handed down, or purchased, I should say, transferred from Matthew and John to Mike and James Zanakis. So it's similar to the other one. It's a change in ownership, change in beneficial interest, change in officers. The one piece on this one that is different than the other one is this has to do with the ongoing construction project where the building's being expanded. And so this one is technically an alteration of the premises, with the license changing from what is the current existing J&M floor plan to the new floor plan on the addition into which they'll be moving the business premises.
Okay,
Happy to answer any questions.
okay. Following procedure from the previous one, then I would, if there's no other comment, that we'll take the selected questions after we close the public hearing. If there's no, as Madam Town Manager said, there's no comments from the public. So I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing, and then you can ask Attorney Vaughn or make comments after that.
I
Move
move the Board
that
of Selectmen, acting as licensing commissioners, close the public hearing to receive comments regarding the application for amendments to the liquor license for Virginia Inc., DBA J&M 701 Salem Street.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Phil DiColigiero,
Chris
second.
Nobley, second.
I believe that I heard Bill a little bit louder than Chris. So the motion moved, seconded. All those in favor say aye. Roll call vote, please.
Laura Bates, aye.
Phil DiColigiero, aye.
Chris Nobley, aye.
Richard Valancourt, aye.
Rosemary Smedili, aye. Okay, so if you're ready to ask questions or make comments to Attorney Vaughn, we'll entertain that.
Madam Chair, this is Lori. Can I just, we did get a comment that it's a little difficult to hear. So if everyone could mute when they're not speaking, I think that would help with the feedback.
Okay. Maybe some of the echoing.
Yeah, that's the best practice in online meetings, is to mute when you're not speaking.
Say that again. Dick, was that you
I just think
speaking?
that's the best practice in online meetings, is to mute when you're not speaking.
Okay.
That's all.
Yeah, it is a difficult night hearing tonight between echoes, and there's a lot of noise, and there's a lot of stuff going on with this particular section of licensing this evening. So, okay, if we could try to do that. Having said that, does anybody have any questions for Attorney Vaughn?
So, Madam Chair, really the same question as the last application. I mean, I'd like to see a layout and a percentage of floor space being consumed for the retail sale of the alcohol and beer and wine. I'm just surprised that that's not part of the application process. This is, normally we see that in all applications for liquor licenses, especially for new establishments, we would have that layout. I just think it's it's important that we have that on the record and going along with the license.
Okay. Any other comments, or Attorney Vaughn, did you want to respond to that or wait for other comments?
Yeah, I guess I'll wait for other comments.
Okay. Does anybody have any comments or questions? Okay, hearing none. Brian, would you like to speak to that, or is there a timeline for when the design will be complete, or is it complete?
So this one actually does have a kind of more of a pressing timeline, just because the project is in construction, and then it's nearing its completion, and their move date into the new premises will be tied to getting the approval from the board here, but then more importantly, to get it reviewed by and approved in Boston. at the ABCC, and particularly with everything going on with COVID and such, there's no telling how long that process could take. But obviously, again, this is a kind of a butcher boy type concept store where it's much more of a convenience store. It's intending to remain a high-end convenience store. The difficulty in identifying exactly where the product will be within the premises is it doesn't it's retail interior. It's kind of be moving around a bit. I mean, I think the floor plan that was submitted did show where they intend to have their cold beer and wine, beer storage. And yeah,
was there a floor plan submitted? Maybe I missed it in the application. Was there a floor plan?
Yeah.
I'm trying to find it. I do not think the clerk put it in the package, so I'm looking through the computer right now to see if I can find it.
But the floor plan, there was a floor plan that was submitted, but the floor plan doesn't show any type of a percentage of floor space. It just showed where the what the layout of the building would be, and where it was intended that there would be aisles and such. But it didn't specifically identify which aisles were going to include and which were going to include the beer and wine, etc.
So does anybody have any questions or any further questions or comments on that?
I'll just add that the application is in order and was reviewed by all of the departments with no issues.
Selectman Valencourt, do you have any further questions or requests?
Nope, that was my only question and request. And again, just citing the reputation and the great reputation and the services that the families provided. It's just, I feel, protecting the town going forward in case there is ever a sale of the business, to ensure that, we have limitations in place to keep it as a market and not become a full-fledged liquor store. Well, that would be a pretty big liquor store out there, but you know what I mean. But if the rest of the board feels, that they want to move forward, that's fine too. We can certainly work that. Everyone's really quiet.
Everybody is really quiet. It's just.
I mean, I feel like this is less of though it's in a neighborhood, it's not one that attracts the same type of foot traffic from minors the way that the other location does. And this is obviously a much larger facility.
Yeah, it's a little less likely to have small children traveling there by themselves. That's for sure. Like walking home from school. That's, even though there's a school somewhat nearby, not quite the same as the one on Middlesex and Waverly. So.
Now, I'd be inclined, again, given the history of the location, it's and sort of what the service and the products have been in the area, to look at this a little differently than Middlesex Street. So I'd be, I think, open to that consideration if this truly is a timing issue. But I do concur that going forward, having that floor plan and getting a better sense of the proportion of space towards alcohol sales is important for us to do.
Okay.
All right, and just to be clear, I don't know if you did find it, but there definitely is a floor plan that's submitted with this application. It may just not have been in your package.
Yeah, Lori said that, right? It was just a matter of it
Yep.
wasn't hyperlinked.
Yeah, and then the one other thing I guess I would say, just kind of reiterating, I think it may have been Chris's comment just there. One of the differences in this from the prior application as well is that it's also a this application is the one that is not seeking the change in classification. It's already, the classification already is in existence at this location as to all alcohol.
Anything from anybody else? Any other? And I would imagine
I'm sorry,
ahead.
Madam Chair. I do have the floor plan. It's just a matter of me trying to download it and then getting it to you guys.
Laurie, if we have the floor plan and we can add it as part of the record, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Okay, having said that, and if there's nothing else, I guess I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Madam Chair, I move to close the public hearing for application amendments to liquor license Virginia Inc., DBA J&M 71 Salem Street.
Phil DiCollegiero,
Chris
second.
Noble.
Go ahead, Phil. I believe I heard you first. Sorry, Chris. It just seemed to be.
Madam Chair, didn't we already close this public hearing, didn't we?
I don't know that we did. I think we heard from Brian. I don't know if we closed it. Maybe we did.
I thought we closed it
You're right,
in order
no,
to
I'm
be able to
sorry.
hear from Brian.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So it's closed. Okay. Well, then I guess I would entertain a motion for a vote.
Laura Bates, I move that the Board of Selectmen, acting as licensing commissioners, approve the application for amendments to the liquor license for Virginia Inc., DBA J&M 701 Salem Street.
Chris
Yeah,
Nobley,
Go ahead, Chris.
Chris Nobley, second.
We have a motion. We have a second. All those in favor say aye. Roll call vote.
Laura Bates, aye.
Phil DiCollegiero, aye.
Chris Nobley, aye.
Richard Valencourt, aye.
And Rosemary Smedili, aye. Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, Madam Chair, so for number E, you're gonna open the public, letter E, you're gonna open the public hearing, do a roll call vote, and then ask for a motion to continue the hearing until our next meeting, and then another roll call vote, and then no action is required on F.
Okay.
Chris
All right,
Nobley
thanks.
move that the Board of Selectmen, acting as the licensing commissioners, and open the public hearing to receive comments regarding the application of SJ Enterprises for a package store license at 12 Massachusetts Ave.
Laura Bates, second.
We have a motion and we have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Laura Bates, aye.
Phil DiCollegiero, aye.
Chris Nobley, aye.
Richard Valencourt, aye.
Rosemary Smedili, aye. Okay. Okay, so we have a public hearing.
Okay,
Any
so now you do a motion to continue.
Okay, we need a motion to continue.
Madam Chair, I'll move that we continue the public hearing to hear comments on the application of SJ Enterprises for a package store license at 12 Massachusetts Avenue to our next meeting on September 28th.
Second.
Chris Nobley, second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Laura Bates, aye.
Phil DiColigiero, aye.
Chris Nobley, aye.
Richard Valencourt, aye.
And Rosemary Smedili, aye. Okay. Motion passes unanimously. And Madam Town Manager, you said on number F.
Yep, no action is required. We'll just move it to the next agenda.
Thank you. That's what I understood.
I'll motion we move out of licensing.
Thank goodness. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Laura Bates, second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of moving out of licensing, say aye. Roll call.
Laura Bates, aye.
Phil DiColigiero, aye.
Chris Nobley, aye.
Richard Valencourt, aye.
And Rosemary Smedili, aye. We are now out of licensing for, I think, one of the most complicated licensing issues that I've ever seen. It was like putting a puzzle together, but all important stuff. So thank you very much for your cooperation, and Madam Chair helping to keep us on the straight and narrow, and Attorney Vaughn for being here with all your explanations. And we look forward to having you back and finishing it up.
Yep. All right, thank you very much. This was definitely one where it would have been a lot easier in person, I think. But I think we did the best we could.
And for those at home, the amount of paper or even reading it online and shifting from this thing to the other, it was a bit of a puzzle and a lot of material to take in, and then it was changing as we went along. So thank you very much for the board's patience and indulgence.
All right, thank you all.
Great. All right. Well, we're moving on to governmental reports, and top of our list is an update on COVID, which has been moving a little bit on us recently. So Melissa and Brian's joining us too, is that correct?
Yes, Health Director LaGrasse is here, I believe. He's muted with his camera off, so hopefully he's still back there. He's coming.
There you go.
There he is.
My computer froze up for a second. All right, so where are we at? You guys want me to give a quick little update?
Please, Brian, we'd appreciate that.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me back again. Just want to start off with a quick little review of some numbers. The USA as a whole, the country, is seeing about 35,000 cases a day. Most of them are out in the West Coast in California and Texas, which is pretty standard because of the size of their states and their populations. Mass is seeing about 2,100 cases over the past week. Yesterday we had 267 cases in Mass, and today we had 235 cases out of about 12,000 tests each day. So we're down to about a 0.8% positive test rate, which is really good. We just had over 300 people in the hospital at this time. This is one of the lowest numbers we've seen since the beginning of the pandemic. This is due to probably the high testing rate, which is extremely good. And we're still actually in green for the metrics that the public health agencies look at to measure progress. Where 4 out of the 6 are green, 2 are still yellow, as I mentioned in the last meeting. Right now, currently, we have about 10 active cases in town, which is a little bit of a bump up from a few weeks ago, but we saw the same bump up at the beginning of July, where we had just into the double digits as last time. I know that this is an increase over the past couple of weeks, but I don't want to set off any alarms. Like I said, we saw this last month, and it's expected once you see a lot more people out and about, a lot more movement, a lot more people getting out and doing stuff, this is what you expect with this type of a virus. Looks like we're staying at our current phase, which is phase 3, step 1, this foreseeable future. I think the governor wants to get back into school, see how this goes, and kind of take it from there. So right now, as a health department, we're doing ongoing enforcement. We get the steady stream of complaints coming in, and we're working with businesses, the sports leagues, the schools, other town departments on keeping everybody up to date on what's going on and monitoring everything that we can see and kind of going from there. So as of right now, we're doing pretty good. I know that we have a few cases, but like I said, the state average is looking really good. The positive testing rate is at 0.8%, which is fantastic. As things open up, I expect we will see more, but we are doing the contact tracing and we are working with all the institutions in town and monitoring all the activity. So I'm here for questions. If you guys have anything, just let me know.
I think it's also important to note that we're testing a lot more people in town than we've ever tested in the past, right? And so Merrimack's doing a really good job of testing everyone on campus weekly, but that also means that, you know, we're processing way more tests than we were before, catching more asymptomatic people than before. And so this little uptick isn't really that surprising due to that.
Right. We're doing 6,500 tests in the past week. As a town, we did about 1,500 a week prior to Merrimack opening up, and they're doing 4,500 a week, if not more, depending on how many vendors they have coming in. And they're doing a really good job keeping up with it, which is awesome.
So I think that's reassuring, because we did have Andrew Mailer here kind of walking through their plan several weeks back, and what you're saying is they're adhering to it, and we're getting confirmation. Are we able to keep track of that as a separate cohort, or where we had a little discussion around that last time?
We are working with them on the numbers and monitoring everything going on in terms of any positive that they may have and where they're coming from, where they're isolating, and where they're quarantining.
Right. And we're working with Merrimack on jointly doing some communication on a regular basis about the numbers. They've been sending out a correspondence to their students and staff, and we're looking for them to kind of cater something to the town as well, so that people can understand what's happening on campus. And that's something we were working on with them today.
Great.
Any surprises from the campus? I know that there have been some news articles that have come out about colleges and universities from other parts of the country that, you know, they weren't aware of gaps until they actually went back to campus and, you know, put whatever plan they had in practice into practice. Anything that's jumping out right now that may be a red flag down the road, or anything that you have to pay closer attention to that you didn't plan, Brian?
I wouldn't say any red flags. I think they've done a really good job testing everybody on site. Like I said, even that they're testing vendors that come in that don't even do a lot of work on campus, but they have the option of getting tested. They are catching some asymptomatic people, which you can kind of foresee, which is a good thing, because asymptomatic people are your silent spreaders. So we're catching these right off the bat, whether they're a resident here in town, a student, or a vendor coming in from someplace else that works for a separate company. So they've caught a few of those, which is really good.
Is contact tracing able to, I think it's a contract, is contact tracing able to identify where some of these people, especially the asymptomatic ones, where they may be encountered in the first place, or does it not dive into that type of detail?
No, only if they're associated with a cluster, which we have caught. But if somebody's coming in from someplace else, we don't know where they got it, but we do the contact tracing with them and then wherever they're coming from. So if they're coming from a local town nearby, we'll pass that off to that local board of health. They'll take over and do all the contact tracing for that person and that company. But yeah, we're not seeing anything. There's really no way to find out where they got it unless they come from an actual cluster, and that is actually located in Maven, and they're epi clusters that we work with, but it's hard to find out sometimes.
Brian, I just had a quick question with the schools opening up in a week or so. Are we all set with having the rapid response teams that Governor Baker spoke about in case we do have an issue in the schools?
Yes, actually guidance just came out this afternoon that has more detail about the rapid response testing and the protocols for utilizing that. And I haven't gone through it completely yet, but it just came out tonight.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Now, in the case of the schools, Brian, I know over the summer you worked differently with our public school nurses specifically, and I should say they worked a lot with the town, correct?
Yeah.
How has that
Yes.
relationship evolved as we've gotten ready for schools to reopen?
We still work with them on a daily basis. They're obviously getting ready for schools opening and all of their individual plans for individual schools. Sorry. There we go. So we still are in constant contact with them just about every day.
Is there anything beyond just the casual, like, it is encouraging to get a constant contact. Is there any type of structured relationship that we now have with, I mean, because they effectively act as two separate silos in a lot of ways. Have we formalized whatever role that the town's health department and Board of Health is playing with our school's health department and healthcare staff?
I don't know if you'd say formalized, but if anything does, right now we're working with them on their protocols, plans, answering all their questions. We have a pretty good idea and help them work with, if there's a positive student, this is what we're going to do, A, B, and C, right down the line, staff, student, faculty, things like that. So we have that all worked out already. There is, like I said, tonight, additional guidance came out from DESE as to formalizing that process. So we don't have any type of written understanding between us and the school department, but we're using the guidance submitted by DESE and the school department to basically go through that entire process.
So with the guidance from DESE, what's our role? What's Town Hall's role in that process?
We do all the contact tracing in conjunction with the school. So if the schools have their assigned seating, their cohorts, they know the students, the locations, the people they're with, who would be considered a close contact in terms of busing, classrooms, and then we'll even take that further, work with the youth center and the youth leagues as to sports and other types of outside activities to find out who those people are, and then we basically contact them and do our tracing part of it. But the schools know where they are, who they're with, and who would be basically determined as a close contact. So we've already worked with them on that, and now we have the official guidance from DESE as of today. But that's been in place for a while.
So in the case, Jane Doe, first grader at
Yep.
Gifford School, she's diagnosed or test positive. What are those steps then? And at what actual points does the town get involved?
We would be involved right away. As soon as there's a positive test, we would be the first ones notified. And then we work with the schools on doing all the contact tracing with the individual, the school department as to where that person is and who they're with, and then the families.
So is DPH the notifier in that case?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
the labs.
So DPH notifies the town, and then it's our responsibility to notify the schools, or is DPH also notifying the school department?
We notify the schools.
Okay.
Yep.
Although sometimes we find out from the employee before we find out from the state. So that allows us to get like a jump start on the contact tracing and cleaning, et cetera. And that's what we have found historically is typically we will have people come in and self-report, which is what we want to encourage before it actually goes through the system. And that allows us to get moving.
But in this case, we're not talking about, the big concern has not been so much as employees or adults coming down with it, but it's like the students. Like, again, Jane Doe in a first grade class ends up testing positive. That sets into motion DPH, right? I mean, so DPH is allowed then to report their name to you, Brian?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. What other types of details do they provide you?
They provide us all the contact information and where they tested, when they tested, symptoms, and then all the contact information to reach out to that person and then start our process of contact tracing, talking about isolation, giving them instructions on how to do that, what's going to be required, how long, what they have to look for, and then the next step is the quarantining of all their close contacts, which isolation and quarantine are two different things.
Brian, just a follow up on the contact tracing. So I understand that the schools have everybody assigned to a seat and, that we have all that information, what bus they're on. What happens for these auxiliary programs where the kids are going when they're not in school? Are they also required to keep that type of information of like where they're seated and who they're around and give you that information?
Yes, we would reach out to the sports leagues, and obviously the student or the person would know what teams they play for. Then we would work with all the teams of filing plans with the youth center and Rick Gorman. So I would reach out to him, get the coaches' names, the league information, and then start the process at that point.
And the same thing goes for like where the kids are, the days that they're home, and there's these other like with the Y and stuff, they're offering like remote learning type situations.
Yeah, so we would talk, obviously, it's student, we would talk to the parents and start the process with them as the adult and the caregiver.
Great. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Brian, any news on like the changes as the cold weather comes with restaurants and things that might be helpful to them, or are we still pretty much in the same position?
Right now, it's still early, but we have been thinking about that. I think they are working with the ABCC on extending their November 1st deadline for outside alcohol consumption as part of that process. I think something that everybody's worried about is when things do move inside. Um, Restaurants are worried about, the number of customers, their bottom line, and the service they can provide with no outside seating. So there's some concern about that. I think prior to getting to that step, we're going to look at how this next phased section goes about getting kids back in sports, getting kids back in school, monitoring the transmission, monitoring the entire pandemic as a whole before they even consider opening up anything further than what we've already done in terms of indoor seating for restaurants and table spacing and things like that. So it's definitely something we've been thinking about down the road, but we're not quite there yet. And want to see how this next step kind of plays out.
Let me ask you this, which could be helpful in preparation if it was something that they could use. If they put up petitions or glass petitions or plexiglass petitions in between, say, tables or booths or whatever, is that going to be allowed, or do you think it will be just strictly numbers or percentage of floor space or something like that? But if they were able to make, like I said, something of almost an enclosed booth, would that change anything?
We've been talking about that. I'm not sure where we're going to go with that, because one thing that you do when you start building all these partitions inside an enclosed space, you defeat the purpose of the air movement and HVAC systems. So you can't do too much all at once without limiting and restricting your flow, whether it's heating and air conditioning at this point. But that's something you have to think about in terms of air exchange and what you're going to do to the overall system and the effectiveness of that. One of the things that we all have talked about in the past few weeks is HVAC. We know that airflow is important. We know that this is a respiratory virus. Increasing air exchanges is a good thing. By reducing that and restricting that would probably be a bad thing. So
speaking of that, you kind of sparked another question from me. So what we're hearing on the news is that they are continuing to say it's a respiratory virus, but they sort of backed away from picking it up on paper or other things. Is that true? Are they finding that most people are getting it is through respiratory systems?
they are seeing that. I don't know. I haven't analyzed all the data for that specifically, but I do know that they have been talking about it's not transferring as well on paper as they originally thought. So that is something they are looking at and starting to figure out at this point. 6 months in, I hope they start to figure some of this stuff out, help us out a lot. But yeah, we are seeing that, and they are kind of leaning that way at this point. I haven't seen any specific written guidance on transmission times on paper versus hard surfaces. I think it's just a general rule of thumb that viruses don't last as long on a porous surface versus a non-porous surface.
Okay, well, good to
Brian,
know.
Yeah, so a roundabout answer is yes to your question.
Okay, thank you.
Brian, a follow-up to Selectman Smedili's question about the outdoor, about restaurants specifically. Have we provided them with any guidance regarding using those outdoor heaters or using tents to extend the season, especially as we start getting to that point of the year where it's just not, even though they could be outside, it's just not as enjoyable for patrons to be outside. And so I know that some municipalities, I've never looked into ours, have certain regulations regarding outdoor heaters. Do we have any regulations? And this may, but in fairness, this may not be under your purview, Brian. It definitely sounds like it may be something that the town manager may have to answer. But are we, Madam Town Manager, are we trying to get that information out to businesses, or have we talked about getting that information out to businesses if there are certain restrictions on outdoor heaters or outdoor tents?
Yes. The outdoor heaters is a fire department area of expertise. something did come out from the fire marshal's office, I'd say about a month and a half ago, to all restaurant and the restaurant association about rules and regulations regarding space heaters or patio heaters under tents. That's something that is fairly dangerous considering you're having a flame source inside a tent, which is flammable. So there are restrictions from the building department as well as the fire department on what can and can't be done with heaters and tents. I think what they've recommended people do is do outside heaters that have blowers that blow the heat into the tent versus having the heaters inside the tents. Don't quote me on that, but I remember reading that about a month and a half ago. Tents in general.
Right. I think on Thursday, the governor announced that he was going to be extending the outdoor dining regulations for an unprecedented amount of time. I don't believe there was an end point on it. I believe on Thursday that announcement came out. And Laurie and Suzanne and I were talking today about whether or not the board needs to vote on the outdoor dining regulations at your next meeting in order to extend those guidelines, because we did have the end date on originally had placed. So the question that we're kind of talking about is whether or not that's necessary, because it seems like the governor's order may have extended the APCC regulations, and we're still trying to kind of figure that part out of it. If we do come back to you with the regulations, we certainly can include information about the heaters. And we were talking earlier today about, the 3-sided tent versus the no-sided tent and whether or not that will work very long. I don't know. Some people went out to eat Saturday night and told me it was quite cold. So, we're talking about that internally. And I think nobody's really certain at this point, but it will require a fire inspection. And the way that a lot of these tents are set up, I would be surprised if they were able to have the type of heaters that would be effective for outdoor dining. But we should, I think, Brian and I can put our heads together with Lori tomorrow, have more information on that at our next meeting.
And I do have a Zoom call scheduled with the restaurants in the next couple of weeks to talk about this kind of stuff. I will mention this and add this to our agenda for outdoor heating, outdoor tents, and outdoor dining past the warmer days ahead.
Any other comments or questions for Brian or Melissa regarding our COVID update?
I'm set.
All right. Well, let's see where we are in another 2 weeks. But again, Brian, thank you for the tremendous work you and the whole team does. And Melissa and Laurie, thank you for staying on top. A lot of moving regulations and parts, but I have to again commend all our businesses in town and the patrons. We seem to be doing the right thing consistently, week after week, month after month. So, little hats off to us. Let's keep it going, as I say. Thanks,
Awesome.
Brian.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Now on to update on the senior center.
Just a quick update on the senior center and where we are, because I'm sure people at home are wondering. And so the town has, as you know, gone out to bid before town meeting so that we would have accurate pricing. And so we do have a general contractor that is under contract to construct the center. It's actually a Castagna Construction out of Danvers. And they have agreed to hold the contract for us and hold the price, even though we haven't been able to move forward yet with the project, which is amazing, because if they hadn't done that, we really would have had to back out to bid, and that would have been a gamble on whether or not we would have had enough funding. So we're very thankful for them. They've been really great to work with. The next steps for us will be closing. So we do need to close on both the properties at Surrey Drive and Sutton Street, and those documents will come before you when we get to that point. We do have one holdup that I wanted to let you know about, and it's certainly not a game changer or a game breaker by any means, but it does extend our timeline. And so there is a tenant that still remains on one of the parcels, and that is preventing us to mobilize the general contractor on the job site. So due to the eviction moratorium that had been through October, but it appears that the federal government extended last week to January, we are unable to start construction until that tenant is able to move out. And so we do have a delay in timeline, but we do have I think a light at the end of that tunnel and a contractor that's willing to work with us. So once we are able to resolve that process and close, we'll start construction. There's some small site stuff that the contractor has started to do now. And that construction period will be about 14 months once we get started.
But we have served the notice, so that allows us not to have to go through process once the eviction is listed. Is that correct? Lifted. Is that correct?
So we're not the party doing the eviction, but correct that that they've already gone through their court process, and
Right.
so that's really the hardest part of the process more than anything else. And so now it's just kind of waiting for that moratorium to be lifted to go forward with service and move along. But most of that process has been completed well before COVID, so that's good news.
Good. I appreciate that. Any other thoughts or questions regarding where we are with the senior center? All right, we'll continue that one along. And then the other big project at the other end of town.
Another quick update on Amazon. And so I don't know, I don't think we've talked about this too much publicly since town meeting, but so that the public knows, the state did approve the TIF. We have received a correspondence from Hildwood that they have created a new corporation that they'll be asking us to transfer their portion of the TIF to. And so you may see that in the next couple of weeks as we move through the process being reviewed now by council. We did receive the 1/3 of the sewer contribution. So we received a $380,000 check from Hildwood for the sewer project, which is a huge step because Hildwood was waiting until we got a little further along in the process, which means we're further along in the process now. So we're happy about that. And we can have signed the contract with the contractor for that sewer, and that project will be starting. We were getting a little anxious because we're on a tight timeline due to a portion of that project being funded by MassWorks. So that's a great step for us. The town has drafted the final development agreement. It's being reviewed by Amazon and Hildwood now. So if you remember correctly, the document that you've already signed is a term sheet. That all of the terms of that will pick up the development agreement. They're working through the legalese of incorporating that into the larger document. And so that's close to being done. We have not yet received any plans or applications for permits, but we do have the progress in place that they were asking for a variance from the state fire commissioner, and they have received that. And so there's many small steps that are building momentum towards that permit process, and we've really seen a lot of progress over the last few months. Just wanted to give you a quick update on it.
It's great. I appreciate it. We just wait for that to come all together here.
I'll tell you that the big check on the sewer project was, that's a great step moving forward. Something that the town has worked with, been working on for years, and it's pretty exciting actually, as far as sewer projects go.
It does change the corridor. It creates that opportunity now. Yeah.
It does.
Okay, I think that's it for governmental reports. So new business. Well, we've got our select board fiscal 21 goals. So tonight just begins our discussion. And to kind of help us get started, Melissa was kind enough to put together a composition of kind of ongoing goals, items we've discussed as the board, and try to give us a starting point to begin the discussion with the objective of at our next meeting ratifying those goals. So hopefully everybody's taken a look at the document, and let's open up the discussion on it.
Sure. So I can just say that the team got together, and what we did was we went through all of your goals from last year. If you remember correctly, we did the goal process a little bit differently, and we created tangible deliverables that were 1 year bites at all of our apples here. So what we did was we went through, we created a new column where we basically report on where we are, what the status is, and then we either carried the goal forward and said this is what we think it should be the 2021 deliverable, or whether or not we thought we accomplished the goal. And then at the bottom, the team got together and we came up with what we thought some more newer goals could be for next year, things that we see coming down, or things that were perhaps we accomplished the goal in 2020, but we knew that there was a next step to that goal for 2021, and so we incorporated that there. So my thought was that, you all could take this document, absorb it, send me any goals maybe that you think you want to add or that you don't think are right, and I could work on kind of creating a more finalized document that we could work off of for the next meeting.
That makes sense.
And obviously we would
That does
update.
make sense, and I think, obviously we need to go back and revisit everything that we had Regina on, and I would suggest Laura, that I think we need to align people's interests with the goals as well. So maybe we should just all take a second look at them. The other question I have is, other than going through this exercise last year and working through our normal processes, I really didn't have much involvement in a lot of the discussions around these goals. Are these, we're listed as selectman lead. Should we be taking a lead on these and setting up meetings, or are there meetings ongoing? I mean, what's the next steps after we sign up for these goals? Because I think, like I said, we did it last year, and I don't recall too many actions that I took anyway. Maybe others did more that I took after the goals were set.
So I like to assign a lead because it gives leadership to the goal, and it also creates a sense of ownership for the board. So for instance, if we have something like a great example is that we've accomplished the goal of the long-term advisory committee bringing a recommendation for the Stevens estate, and I'm suggesting a new goal, which would be that we implement the recommendation of the Board of Selectmen. Having one board member who is the lead for that goal is helpful because they can be the liaison with us as we go through the process. They can be the voice at town meeting for the board, and it kind of brings that sense of board ownership to what we're doing. This year has been kind of a strange year, but I do think it would be good as we move through next year if we do our best to try to have the board more involved in some of these day-to-day type goals.
Okay.
And I think it also gives development. Go ahead, Dick.
I was going to say, so the homework will be to just go back, review the goals again, and make sure that we still are in alignment with wanting to be the lead on that, and then of course reviewing Regina's and ensuring that we have those all covered as well.
Right, and then letting me know if you have new goals that maybe we didn't think of. We brainstormed with the staff, but there may be things that obviously we're not thinking of that you're thinking of that we could add, or maybe there is goals that just are not a priority this year that were last year that we would drop. And we can so we had ordered them last year. I think high priority, medium, and low, and that actually helped me in a lot of ways because the high priority things were things that we started triggering right away, and then the lower priority we could eat at slowly. And so doing that again, I think would be helpful for the staff.
Okay.
So I think the way to pull this together would be if individually folks could just kind of get back to me with what, at least on the spreadsheet, is kind of your lead, and if there's any feedback in there, I'll incorporate that all into a document in advance of the meeting, and then we'll get that to you all so that we've got a chance to review it and then finalize it in the meeting if that's okay with everyone.
I have one more comment. In the past, we used to do work sessions where we would schedule a meeting with the only thing on the priority was to review the goals. Do we want to consider having a special meeting to just do the due diligence and go through these goals and make sure, review the priorities, review the select leads, and basically review the goals and see if we have any others that we want to add to this. You know, just, and possibly we could even have an in-person meeting. I mean, of course, it would be open to the public, but in the past, we've never had any public participation in those meetings. So just a thought, either virtual or in person, but maybe a special meeting just to work through these goals.
I would be in favor of an in-person meeting. I've always found that exercise helpful. I think it's good for all of us to get on the same page, especially when we have a new colleague. I would very much like to see that happen.
So we may be able to do an in-person meeting. The allowance for an in-person meeting is really only for the legislative body, which is in our instance is town meeting. So if we can see if they would let us do an in-person meeting, we would have to we'd have to still have it on Zoom, so that it has to be accessible to the public. Unless we did it outside. But even then, only if we had more than a certain number of people come, we'd have to end. But we certainly could try. Let me sit with Suzanne tomorrow and brainstorm ideas on how we could accomplish kind of more of a working meeting in person.
Great. I think that'd be excellent. Thank you, Dick, for that. Thank you. Any other thoughts or comments about that? Otherwise, we'll leave it in Melissa's hands to get back to us on the follow-up. Okay. Next on our agenda is confirmation of appointment of Richard Tilson to the Board of Health. And a very qualified person. His resume's attached in here. I don't know if Melissa, there's anything more you would add?
No, we're very excited to welcome Dr. Tilson. We had a lot of great applications. I don't think I've ever seen so many applications to the Board of Health ever. But the Board of Health is quite the place to be right now with everything going on. So the process was that the Board of Health director and one of the members of the Board of Health Commission did interviews, and Dr. Tilson, they said, really stood out. But we have kept all of those resumes on file because we have lots of other committees and commissions, and we look forward to sending them Phil's and Laura's way so that we can continue to attract all these new people. So we were really happy to see that.
Yeah, that's great. And with the new chair, very helpful. Yes.
Yeah, we're very fortunate to have a person of his background to step up to do this. We're very fortunate.
Absolutely.
Okay, so with that, I'll make a motion. Move that the Board of Selectmen confirm the appointment of Richard Tilson to the Board of Health for a term ending June 30th, 2023, sorry.
Second.
Thank you, Rosemary. Roll call vote, please.
Laura Bates, aye.
Phil DiColigiero, aye.
Rosemary Smedili, aye.
Richard Valencourt, aye.
And Chris Nobley, aye. And Dr. Tilson, welcome. Thank you. We're going to be looking towards you for good guidance and help. So thanks again. All right. And next on our agenda is, believe it or not, didn't we just have one of these? Our annual town meeting. So we need to vote on this in accordance with Mass state laws. And I think we're looking at the 3rd of May, 2021. Is that correct?
The 18th.
I think it's the third Tuesday in May.
Third Tuesday. I'm sorry, third Tuesday. The 18th. Sorry, a little punchy here.
So, I'll move that the Board of Selectmen set the date of the annual town meeting to May 18th, 2021 at 7 p.m.
Second.
Thank you, Rosemary. And roll call vote, please.
Laura Bates, aye.
Phil DiColigiero, aye.
Rosemary Smedili, aye.
Richard Valencourt, aye.
And Chris Nobley, aye. So we are set, and we hope to have our town meeting on May 18th, 2021 in a familiar way and forum. Let's hope that, eh? All right, next, we have a vote to release the legal opinion of KP Law regarding the authority for Stevens Estate. And I appreciate town manager reaching out to our consultants, KP Law, to give us really a firm legal opinion on the management authority of the Stevens Estate. Melissa, maybe you can give us just a little more background as we consider our action on this.
I'd be happy to do that. So, as you know, there's been much conversation, right? I would say over the past few years about authority and the future of the Stevens Estate. And in my opinion, sometimes the best thing to do, rather than try to guess at what our roles are, is to really just get into the meat of the matter and figure it out. So I had requested a legal opinion from KP Law that ran through several different questions. And we have received it. We received it on September 11th. And what I am recommending is, we don't really have a process for releasing legal opinions in town, but the Board of Selectmen holds privilege for all legal opinions, right? That your job, and you're the only ones that can waive that privilege. And so my thought process on this is that this is a legal opinion that we want to share with the public, and that perhaps we want to really have a good discussion about with the trustees and with the town meeting. And so what I'm suggesting tonight is that before we refer to the opinion, before we discuss the opinion in any way, is that we take a vote to release the opinion to the public. And then my next recommendation is that, while I welcome any conversation you want to have tonight, is that we ask Attorney Silverstein, Attorney Reach, to come to our next meeting, so that, one, by then we'll have released the opinion to the public, so the public will be able to send any comments or questions they may have about the opinion. And two, you can ask them questions or clarifying type things of nature, so that you can get the answers that you all need as well. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. So what I'm suggesting tonight, and it is up to you, it is your privilege to waive, is that we vote to release this opinion to the public.
Mr. Chair, when I first saw that we had to vote to release it, I was a little bit surprised, because it wasn't in keeping with our past practices, or maybe we just didn't exercise that the Board of Selectmen has the right to get legal opinions to be held, I guess, confidentially, because our practice has always been open government, and it didn't kind of tie into that. But learning from the town manager that we do have that privilege, but I strongly feel, especially on this matter, but I think just about in almost any case, that it should be released to the public. This was an important issue. A lot of time, money, energy was put into the Stevens Estate through the years, and I think it would be a very wise decision to, share it with our partners, the town, and in all the decisions and knowledge that go along with the estate. And I very much appreciate that the town manager did it in this way. And I think perhaps we've all learned something, that I didn't realize, that we could have privileged legal opinions that don't necessarily have to be released, but I certainly would support it.
Thank you. Any other comments about this, about our process with this?
Would you like me to promote the chair?
I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. I would move that the Board of Selectmen vote to release the legal opinion of KP Law regarding authority for the Stevens Estate.
Philby Colagero, second.
Thank you. Thank you. If there's no other discussion, I'll ask for a roll vote, please.
Laura Bates, aye.
Philby Colagero, aye.
Rosemary Smedili, aye.
Richard Valancourt, aye.
Chris Nobley, aye. So this will be released as a 5-0 approval. And again, I really appreciate, I think this just reinforces how important we value this, to your point, Rosemary, and that the transparency which we've tried to do with the long-term committee all ties into this. So I'm looking forward to our next meeting and really having a path now, I think, clearer for the town as to how we could proceed. And we'll probably touch on that under old business a little bit. But before we get to that, we just need approval of our minutes from the open session of August 31st, 2020. Do I have a motion for that if there are no changes?
Mr. Chair,
Chair,
go ahead.
go ahead.
I
No,
move
no,
that-
Laura, you,
I move that the Board of Selectmen approve the open session minutes of the August 31st, 2020 meeting as written.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Dick. And just a roll call vote, please.
Laura Bates, aye.
Phil DiColigiero, aye.
Rosemary Smedili, aye.
Richard Valencourt, aye.
Chris Nobley, aye. Motion passes 5-0, approving those minutes. Okay, consent items, I don't think we have any. And that brings us to old business. And so the one item we've got here is discussing, we have this recommendation from the Stevens State Long-Term Planning Committee. And we're in a position as a board to recommend it, to support it, to modify it, to table it. So it's really up to us to take some action on. So that's where we're at with this, which is that we have a formal recommendation that Jim LaFond took us through very nicely last time. And now it's on our table to decide what to do with it. So I open up the discussion for that.
So one thought I had was that perhaps Laurie and I could start working on drafting an RFP that goes in line with what the Long-Term Advisory Committee suggested. We could form the narrative, look into what we think we need to include for terms in order to meet the goals of the Long-Term Advisory Committee and also the different polls and surveys that we've done. We can think a lot about the evaluation criteria, and then rather us just put the RFP out like we typically would do if we're going through this process. We would bring the RFP to you. We were thinking it would probably take us about 3 weeks to do a draft. And then we could all weigh in and have an open conversation about whether or not the RFP meets the goals of the board. And maybe that would be a good way to kind of spur conversation amongst you all to see if that's the direction that you want to go in.
So Melissa, I
go
like
ahead.
that initial. I like that initial approach. My one addition to it would be that, if you and Lori were to dive into it, to include one or more representatives from the Long-Term Planning Committee, specifically the chairman. He had expressed his willingness to continue to be part of this process at minimum as a sounding board. And I think that while we receive their recommendation, it's good to have, I think, the intentions of this committee embodied in whatever the next steps we take are. And so that, I think if there's one lesson that we should never forget from anything actually that we do, and that is, regardless of whether it's Stevens Estate or any other project, it's that duplication can never happen too much. And I think that this particular group invested itself over the past year plus. And so why not continue to lean on them and solicit their own feedback so that they don't just feel involved. It's not about their feelings so much as the end result reflects what it was that they wanted to see happen. Because again, for me, as an individual selectman, I approached this as if this group of very different people were willing to dive into this, do the research, and then come to a conclusion collectively that they could all agree on. I want to be able to support that, and I want whatever this RFP is that we end up putting out, as well as anything that ends up coming back to us. I want all of that to reflect the intentions of this group of people.
I agree, and I think we should create a very diverse evaluation committee. And so the chief procurement officer is in charge of creating a evaluation committee that evaluates the proposals that we receive. And I think having a diverse committee to do that is going to be helpful as well, because while it is very objective based on the evaluation criteria, it can be subjective as well in how you read it. And so I think having a diverse committee to make that recommendation will be helpful. And I know you haven't yet accepted their recommendation, right? You took their report, you didn't vote to accept their recommendation. And I don't know as a board if you're ready to do that or not, or if you need to really see that recommendation maybe laid out practically through the RFP. And I guess that's kind of what my question would be.
I'm certainly open to that. The only thing that I think, because I think it could be helpful, is also perhaps having a member from the trustees of the Stevens estate as well, be involved in that. I think that there's a lot that they could probably bring to the discussion.
Well, this RFP would essentially abolish them anyways. I'm very interested, regardless, of making sure that we have multiple voices represented from the long-term planning committee. And again, that the chairman did say that he would be willing to be a sounding board at minimum. I know he had said that this wasn't he doesn't have a background in developing RFPs, but certainly he dove into this and had a vested interest. And so I hope we continue to engage him, but also other members of the long-term planning committee.
I think we also, having a little bit of anxiety going down this path again, I think we also need to ensure that we make this as transparent and as public a process as possible. And I'm not saying we didn't last time, because I think we did, but I think a lot of the feedback came back to us that it was a surprise to a lot of people that we were just making this discussion or having a discussion on the Stevens estate. I don't know how we can make it more public than it was last time, but I think we need to ensure that this is a very public process and that the information is available and out there, specifically to groups like the Historical Society, the Historical Commission. Even though I know they had members on the long-term planning board, the long-term planning committee, but I still think we need to make sure that they've got the report in their hands. They've got the intentions of creating an RFP. Everything has to be as transparent and as out there as we can possibly make it, even over advertising it and over communicating it. Because like I said, last time, that was one of the biggest criticisms I think we got, is that nobody knew about it. And all of a sudden we were bringing this to town meeting. So I think we need to over communicate.
I agree. And I think if this is the path that the board chooses to go down, what we can do is go ahead and create a separate website like we've done for a lot of our other projects. We can't make the RFP widely available once it's finalized, because we won't know who's requesting it to respond, and we have to be very careful about making sure that we give addendums to everyone who requests it. So, but we can talk a lot about what's in it, and we can maybe do another virtual town hall like we did for Amazon, which was very well received, and try to find a way to really build collaboration around the process. I think is going to be very important.
Okay, sounds good.
Oh, Chris, we can't hear you. I don't know why.
I'm sorry, there we go. So am I hearing from, appreciate it. So am I hearing from the board that that the RFP is going to really be derived from the general recommendations of the long-term planning committee, and that from that will then shape it without at this point formally taking the recommendations as say, in other words, kind of incorporating it as we get information, as we get feedback over the next couple of weeks, rather than accepting it as the core of the RFP. Is that where we're going? I'm just trying to understand what we want to do here.
But my feelings are that we can accept their recommendation, but it's a moot point if they're not involved with the RFP process, and whatever is produced is not consistent with what some or all of those members were hoping to get out of whatever our next steps were. So I would like to see those happen concurrently, that we have our RFP process, but that it involves them, the long-term planning committee members, either some or all of them. And so the final key steps brought to us as a select board, that would be when I'd say, based on whatever feedback was collected by the town manager and by Lori, and whatever the final document was, if it's something that's coming to us with their, I guess you could say, blessing, the long-term planning committee's at least informal blessing, it would be helpful for me, because again, the whole reason why we asked this particular group to go about this process was to get us to this point, but really it's all for nothing if the next steps we take are consistent with what they want to see.
I think what makes the most sense is that me and Laurie get the skeleton of the RFP together. So that we get a good moving draft, and then we can start incorporating Jim LaFond and a member of the trustees, because as we know from their legal opinion, they are advisory to the board as well when it comes to, so we can get them as well, and we can kind of get everybody's opinions going, so we can get a good form to you guys before, make sure it's well baked before it comes to you, so we're not having any questions or concerns.
Yeah.
I think that's good, and thank you for including a member from the trustees. They have been working hard. I would feel very badly if we kind of left them with the fact that, well, we'll no longer need them. So I think it would be great to have they put a lot of heart and soul into the estate. So thank you for that. Great.
Okay, well, that's how we'll proceed then.
All right,
So
we will try to have that for you at your first meeting in October.
Again, appreciate the effort on. I know that's a lot to do, but this is a real critical opportunity. And to Dick's point, having the process for getting information out and keeping that transparency is going to be really, really critical here. So good stuff. All right, with that, Melissa, your town manager's report.
Oh my gosh, I don't know if I have anything else. I've talked a lot. I do want to thank the fire department for their 9/11 event. I unfortunately couldn't be there due to kindergarten orientation, but I know that Dee and Selectwoman Miss Medilli were both there. And I think that they put such a nice memorial forward every year. I just want to thank you for doing that.
And they did. It was very nice. And the fun thing about it that I'd like to share, and Dee can also speak to it, is so the seniors from the Prescott House came out and stood on the corner and watched the ceremony, which was very nice. It was like a nice surprise to see them there and participate, because as you probably know, it was held at the fire station. Some of that out of fear of COVID, not to have it too public, but it was great to see some of the seniors and staff come out in the drizzle and support the event. So it was very nice.
All right. Well, with that, maybe we'll just kind of work from select board updates and comments. So, Rosemary, anything else you'd want to add?
I think that's it. But thank you.
Sure. Anyone else have any other comments or updates? Well, we're going to wish our schools the best. Dick, did you?
No, I said no, sir. No comments, updates.
Well, we're going to wish our school administration, our teachers, and of course the parents and all the kids heading back to school this week. Here we go. Let's continue to do the right thing and talk to one another, but also do the right thing. Social distancing, be safe, right? Our next meeting is going to be on the 28th of this month, September 28th, on Monday. And so with that, I'll ask for a motion for adjournment.
Mr. Chair, move adjournment.
Thank you.
Laura Bates, second.
All right, and if I could have a roll call, please.
Laura Bates, aye.
Phil DiColigiero, aye.
Rosemary Smedili, aye.
Richard Valencourt, aye.
Chris Mobley, aye. And with that, we're done. Thank you. Stay safe, all. We'll see you in a few weeks.